Hi, everyone. Happy Monday to you. I hope it was a great weekend. We're back here on Techstrong Gang, but this is a new era of Techstrong Gang. We're going to be coming at you every day this week because we're going to 5 days a week on Techstrong Gang, except for July 4th, which is just coming up, and we'll be off for July 4th and 5th. Otherwise, you'll see us every day here on Techstrong Gang. Hi, everyone. I hope you had a great weekend. It's Alan Schimmel for Techstrong back here on Techstrong Gang. We've got an interesting lineup of gang members as well as some great topics we're going to be covering. We're going to talk a little FinOps. I don't know if it's fun, but FinOps, it's hard to make that fun. We're going to talk a little bit about Gen AI and Anthropic, kind of movement. Anthropic anxiety is what we're calling it. And then we're going to, lucky enough, we had Mitchell out in Berlin and for the SUSE Con, and we're going to hear a little bit about, SUSE just ain't Linux no more. But before we do, let me introduce you to our gang members. As I mentioned, Mitchell is back from Berlin. He's back at sitting up high in the Rocky Mountains. I don't know if he's high or not.
I'm breathing fresh air.
But he is breathing some fresh air. Hey, Mitchell, it's good to have you back.
Wonderful to see you guys.
All righty. Joining Mitchell is the newest member of the Techstrong editorial team. He's a rock star, though, and he joins us from out in the valley. It's John Swartz. John, welcome. Good to see you. Have you back here.
Y'all. Happy to be here again.
Did they say you all in the valley, or is that more a southern thing?
Interestingly enough, I went to school in the South, and I use the phrase y'all a lot.
I try to too, but that New York mouth of mine, it just doesn't. You just can't get it right.
The twang
as well. Yeah,
it's the twang. Is that what it is? It's a twang.
Gotta have the twang.
All right. Speaking of twang, joining us from New Mexico. And you can only imagine, is she on a ranch there with horses? Is she in Albuquerque? She'll never tell. Only her hairdresser knows for sure. Our good friend, Tracy Ragan. Hey, Tracy, how are you?
I'm good, and it's great to be back. It's so great to be back. I really love doing this. It's a lot of fun.
Absolutely.
We loved having Tracy and her husband in Colorado. They were here last week, so we got to...
Really?
Yeah.
Good to you guys. Excellent. Anyway, so, great gang lineup for today. We've got some interesting topics. The first one is around FinOps, and we labeled it FinOps Fun. I have to tell you the truth. I have a hard time thinking of FinOps as fun. It's like, I remember the worst class I ever took in law school was accounting for lawyers. The worst mark I ever got in law school, too.
That explains a lot of things.
Yeah, it does, probably, now that you mention it. But, there's a lot going on in FinOps around Gen AI, but Mike, I'll kick it to you.
Yeah, so the folks at the FinOps Foundation had a little conference last week, and they rolled out the 1.0 specification of a thing called Focus, which seeks to normalize all the descriptions and data points that you use to evaluate various cloud services. So you can do more comparisons. You can launch SQL queries against this stuff, and it will come back with some answers about, well, what is this compared to that on, say, AWS versus Microsoft Azure, which is a giant step in the right direction, because today these things are difficult to understand what goes with what and what am I buying versus this one. At the same time, we've seen an outfit called Vega Cloud, which is one of the smaller cloud service providers, now starting to apply Gen AI to FinOps. And they're basically saying, hey, we can use these tools now that we normalize the data to summarize what these services do, to maybe launch some natural language queries so I don't even have to know SQL. We think that this is a step in the right direction. Maybe it's even overdue, but Tracy, you're in the industry. What's your sense of what's going on here, and how much will it help folks?
When it comes to crunching numbers, I think AI is perfect for it. Why not? Anything in the area of what we would normally do with a spreadsheet, I think is going to be replaced by AI. And we could probably ask around, and we could find out that there are a lot of spreadsheets trying to track this kind of data. So I'm pretty excited about this space. I think it's an important space, and it will help a lot of organizations moving forward become more adjusted. Let's just say adjusted to tracking costs in this area.
Hey,
so it's a great use.
Mitch, I had a quick question, if it's okay, for either Tracy or for Mike. The FinOps Foundation CTO, Mike Fuller, said the goal was to make it simpler for IT teams to track a set of cost metrics that would enable them to better assess the value of various cloud services. I'm wondering, what is the time frame, do you think, on this, and how much could this conceivably save companies? I'm just wondering kind of practically where we are.
Well, it's an interesting question because I think it was Flexera maybe last week or the week before had a study out. There's an article on Techstrong ITSM about it that was just saying there's a ton of wastage in the spending in IT organizations, and they specifically cited cloud, where a third of the folks were saying that it was beyond 40%. It was just a huge number of wasted cycles and usage of cloud resources because developers don't really have the best practices for using these VMs and whatever other resources they have, so they tend to leave them on. They don't want to take down some of the stuff that then when they're not using it, and there's no controls and there's no automation underneath that to drive that. So it's actually quite a significant issue. On the other hand, I mean, Mitchell, I'd love to get your opinion in here as well. Some people kind of look at IT these days and they go, well, because it's hard and it's the cloud, we're a little maybe spending money like drunken sailors on a Friday night. But, what's your sense of the actual maturity of organizations when it comes to cloud spending?
Well, the cloud sounds like it's one thing, but it's 1,000 things. It's death by 1,000 cuts, right? It could be $999 here. It can be $20,000 here. It's all over the place. And, as much as I don't enjoy spreadsheets, they were the first low code, no code tool, by the way. So much of our business runs on that. But what is all that stuff? A financial person's not going to know. They need to know, is this equivalent to that? And can I get by with this instead of that? That sort of analysis is what they have to work with the IT team to do. And the problem is you have to just ride herd on it constantly. That's why I think it's an ops part of FinOps. It isn't once a year, let's go do this, because, I've tried that and it's easy for it to immediately get out of control because everybody with a credit card in the company is going and buying the next shadow IT service or legit service for IT. So it is a problem because it's not like you're buying $250,000 worth of software from Microsoft. And I know that's a bill that it's going to come due once a year, blah, blah, blah. Well, when it's usage-based and it's a whole bunch of different services that don't aggregate into one contract, it's much, much tougher to track and understand what it is.
As developers, we don't want to spend the time doing that. Honestly, we don't want to spend time looking at the costs that we might be facing. But if you put it in our face and say, this VM is costing you this much money, or you've got these clusters that are running and nobody's using it, well, then we'll shut them down, or we'll even get creative and write something to stop it, right? To clean up our environments. We've ran into this at the CD Foundation more than once, and it's not a once a year thing. It's like at the end of the month, you're like, how come we spend so much money? So these tools need to put it in our face so that we'll do something about it. Otherwise, we're not. This is not an area that we're going to focus on. We're worried about getting the code out.
It's not an area you're going to focus on as an IT person, but the CFO gives a crap, and the rest of them, and the rest of his organization, and those bills get out of control. To your point, Mike, it's unfair to throw dirt on the grave of the developer here, saying it's their fault for not closing these things down. It's an ops issue, right? And it's a platform engineering issue. If you design your platform right, you would think as part of ops, things are being monitored, and when they're not being used, they're being optimized. But I remember from the very first time when the FinOps Foundation first started, we interviewed the founder of the FinOps Foundation. We usually interview him every year at KubeCon as well. Look, this was always a solution that cried out for AI. Before it was generative AI, it was AI ops or machine learning or whatever you want. But And I think this goes to the heart of the Techstrong ITSM article, as well as the AI article around Vega, which is we need to build this into our platform. We need to build it into our operations where we're monitoring constantly our cloud usage. That when something hasn't been used, it's either shut down automatically or a warning goes out that it's going to be shut down automatically if you don't do something. It's an important issue because the amount of money wasted, and the FinOps Foundation has numbers on this, the amount of money wasted on unused cloud resources is in the billions of dollars. As much as AWS or Google or Microsoft don't want you to know that, it's measured in the billions of dollars. And because what has evolved was, why do you use cloud? It wasn't to save money. Right? Cloud can cause more.
That was part of the argument.
The idea behind cloud was the burstability and the elasticity. But what's happened is it's like when you blow up a balloon and you let the air out, it never goes back to the size it was. It's kind of stretched out, right? The cloud seems to be elastic one way. It can keep going bigger and bigger and bigger. Without something like FinOps, you never see it shrinking back down.
I think FinOps, I was just going to jump in. I think FinOps ultimately is kind of the rocket money of managing the cloud, right? If you're familiar with the Rocket Money app, that's one of those. You've got 3 subscriptions to Netflix. Do you need 3? Why don't you cancel 2 of them and just have 1? Or you have all these things in your kind of spending, but of course in a much more complex. I think, Alan, to your point about the cloud is elastic, but it also led to the elastic wallet for organizations, which is it balloons too, and it doesn't shrink down in size unless you force it to go down.
John, did it surprise you to find out that AWS and Google and Microsoft and most recently Oracle are all on board for this program? Because theoretically they might lose money.
It seems counterintuitive to me, right? But there's this classic tension that's here where the IT team's trying to reduce cost during an economic headwinds, while at the same time they can't compare the cost of the cloud services accurately. It seems counter to me. I'm not sure what the rationale would be. What do you think?
I'll tell you what I think. I think Microsoft and the rest of them want to embrace and extend FinOps, right? And you know what that means. So, yes, what do you want them to say? No, we're against FinOps because we want people wasting money with us. No, of course it's not. We want every dollar to deliver maximum value to our customers.
Well, the dirty secret too is that's how you upgrade people, right? Oh, that's the old version of that. So you need to get on this too. Exactly. Which why that has 5 new things.
These companies are notoriously good at speaking everything to everyone with an ulterior motive.
I mean, it makes a lot of sense.
Hey, if they were really serious about it, you know what they should do? Make their bills easier to read. Did you ever read your cloud bill? It's worse than your cell phone bill.
That seems to be a trend, though, in tech, right? It's really hard to understand the terms of service, the bill. It's hard to cancel out of a service. We talked about this about Adobe. This is tried and true and something that they have done for years, and they don't seem to be in any rush to reverse.
Well, they keep it up. The government's going to have to get involved.
It is.
That was yesterday's show. Sorry.
Yeah.
State of California
show.
You see, there's a self-preservation there as well. There's companies who are starting to look at those bills and saying, gee, should we really be using AWS or Azure?
Or the cloud in general.
Yeah. So there's some self-preservation because I'm guessing that there's some big CFOs of big companies complaining about those bills.
Right.
I think maybe they've been caught. They've been caught now, and tools like Vega Cloud is going to expose it and make it easier for us to manage it.
Yeah, they're like the Microsoft, Amazon. They're trying to mollify the people with the pitchforks right now, right? They do that not just in this area, but across the board when it comes to security, or it comes to getting their hands caught in the cookie jar with Brad Smith recently at Microsoft. I mean, not to go off path, but this guy was the white knight of why tech should be so much better about protecting the rights of individuals, and yet then he's testifying just along those lines as well. So anyway,
well, that was a previous show. But Tracy, I wanted to ask you a question. Do you think that this is something we're going to like trust AWS and Google and Microsoft to surface, or is this going to have to be some third party is going to step in here and use all this data to present something in a way that we can compare and contrast and make some sort of rational decision?
I think it's going to be third parties. Absolutely. This is a marketplace, and it'll be third parties. I don't think that the big three are going to push too hard.
No, and I think that's the whole rationale behind the FinOps Foundation. And, you know, if we didn't say it, I want to say it here. The FinOps Foundation's done a great job, right? It's part of Linux Foundation. They really have surfaced this issue. They've done a good job of, getting most of the vendors in this space on board and kind of raise the visibility of this. And it's, and then there's this whole movement around, rebounding off the cloud, reparation, and moving back to the data center, because perhaps it is cheaper than that.
Well, it's also driven by where the data is, and a lot of these AI models need to go where the data is, and the data is still sitting on premise.
No, but a lot of people are immigrating, or not immigrating, repatriating off the cloud back to the data center because of cost, of security, of political, regulatory, that you got to keep, you got to know where your data is and stuff. Granted, there's a problem that, more than 50% of data is not in the cloud to begin with. But what is in the cloud, it's kind of like people immigrating or, moving to Florida, but there's a steady stream of people moving out of Florida once they find out what goes on here. And it's the same thing with the cloud.
I agree, Alan. I think that's going to be... That's
now, Florida or the cloud?
On the cloud.
Okay.
Exactly.
I'm not actual opinion about Florida.
All good. Anyway, hey, I think we've beaten this one. We could have our AI people look to make this more efficient, but you should pay attention to your cloud bill. You can do that right now while we take a quick break, but hurry back because we're going to talk about Anthropic next.
All right, folks, welcome back. We're talking about AI and large language models once again, and most of that conversation has wrapped itself around OpenAI and Microsoft and to a certain extent Google, but there's another player out there called Anthropic, and they are starting to gain some traction. They put out an announcement saying that their models are slightly faster than they were 3 months ago, and I'm not quite clear why that matters, but John, I know you were talking to them recently. What's your sense of what's going on with these guys? They seem to get a lot of coverage, but in terms of actual usage and market share, I don't know.
Yeah, no, it seems more of a market ploy than anything else. I've been reading a lot of books recently about the Cold War, and when I saw what Anthropic was doing, it kind of reminds me of this digital version of the nuclear arms race war, where there's the space war, that there's breathless claims about speed, distance, stockpiles. I mean, in a sense, this is about establishing bragging rights and companies leapfrogging one another based on their claims of better speed. Now, think about it. 3 months ago, Anthropic announced a model that now 3 months later, this new one, 3.5 version, Claude Sonnet, is 3.5 times faster in only 3 months. I don't know what that means, but it also they announced an enterprise solution as well on top of that. So they're, in a sense, making these announcements from blogs with canned executive quotes. It's basically creating a one-day news event with no critical reporting. In a sense, it buys you part of a news cycle for a couple of days until the next claim comes along. So, maybe next week OpenAI leapfrogs them. And I think this kind of plays into this skepticism a lot of us have, including consumers and businesses, about the evolution of AI. We don't know truly how much faster or how much more efficient this system is going to be. I mean, Anthropic says that you can do a free user case of the latest version, but in a limited capacity. So I don't know what conclusions you can draw from that. I just see this as part of the AI hype cycle, and it's something we're going to probably grow accustomed to and probably tired of in the next several months. I'm just waiting for the next announcement.
So, John, I agree with you. When I read your article, that was the first thing that popped in my mind is the space race, right? Who sent the first chimp in? What was the first chimp to use Gen AI? And was it a dog, a woman? And, and we got this Sputnik thing going on. But the fact of the matter is, look, when it comes to Anthropic, they are kind of a dark horse, even though, look, they've taken money from, I think, Google and AWS, right? AWS, I thought, was putting a lot of wood behind Anthropic. But Brad Feld, who all the venture-backed startups I ever started, Brad was a key investor, and he always used to say, if you're not in the top 3 of any given market and you can't get to the top 3, get the hell out. Right. And I think that's what you're seeing here in Anthropic. You've got OpenAI, you got Google, they're not going anywhere. Apple's now come out with Apple Intelligence. How much of that is truly Apple, I don't know. But Anthropic looks like the 4th horse coming at the head of the stretch here. And if you're not in the top 3, get the hell out.
Brad stole that from Jack Welch, who said that at GE originally, and after he retired,
who's Jack Welch?
After he retired, wrote a book and recanted that statement. So
I think specifically when it comes to tech, and you look at exits, it's Jack Welch was talking about business in general, but I think when Brad used to talk about it just in terms of liquidity events,
right? He's talking about multiples and what the
right.
The relevance.
The top 3 make the most for investors.
I don't know. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Tracy.
No.
The truth is that this space is moving at the speed of light. There are changes in it all the time, and innovation is required right now. So I think a company, as Alan has pointed out, who might not be on the top 3, they really want to get up to the top 3. They have to innovate at the speed of light. It is an arms race. I don't necessarily, I have not been super excited about some of the innovation coming out of the big companies, the Googles. I mean, it's there, but maybe it's not quite as complete as a small, eager and aggressive company like Anthropic.
So in a sense, maybe, yeah. So in a sense, Anthropic puts pressure on them to maybe jostle them out of their current state, or maybe Anthropic is angling for some sort of exit strategy. I don't know. They've raised billions.
They raised plenty of money. Yeah.
I think Anthropic is definitely legit. I mean, it's Cloud 3, and they're keeping pace. OpenAI tends to take the oxygen out of the room, along with the big folks and with Facebook and Google and others, Apple now. Yeah, I think we're just in this early tumultuous period where, the chips arms race, the LLMs are arm race. There's so many things going on all at once. And I think what I hear, first of all, the balloon's kind of falling off the AI rose. Say we get really bad answers out of it and we can't rely on those things. Well, yeah, that kind of happens with large language models that train on massive amounts of data. Most people I talk to right now are trying to figure out, one, how should I go with smaller language models, things that either I can train or control my data going into, and kind of get away from the wide, broad answers that you'll get from the really large models. And also looking at how do I truly run this in production and move from science experiment to pilot to early production applications of AI with specifically Gen AI. So we're still in the, I don't even know which road to drive on yet, more or less how to drive this car.
Yeah, no, I agree, Mitch.
John Willis was on the show a couple of weeks ago, and he was raising a similar point. And he said, though, ultimately it comes down to who's going to make it easy for me, the developer, to use this stuff, not how fast it is, because, he was going through all the list and he was saying the reason he uses Microsoft and OpenAI is that it's simple compared to everything else. And maybe these guys are focused on, I got a faster LLM, but
maybe they're not focused on developers.
Right. Maybe not on the right
thing. AI has a lot of applications. But I'll tell you something else, though. I'll speak on behalf of DevOps.com. What's the matter with more frequent releases?
I was just going to say that.
10x our AI, right? 10 deliveries a day.
I was saying we're complaining about it waiting 3 months for a release. I'm thinking, why did it take 3 months?
Since when do we do that around here? We want
enough
more
for DevOps, enough for AI.
I think I'm all for the more releases, but I feel like whenever somebody stands up and starts making claims about their performance, they're trying to hide some other anxiety they have, if you follow me.
Well, when I was in the web hosting business back in the mid to late 90s, it was all about speeds and feeds, right? Because back then, when you dialed in, you literally still dialed in. It wasn't, she made that the modem noise. But that's how much, how big did I have a T1? Well, maybe it was fractional, but I still called it a T1. And then when, oh my God, you only got a T1, I got a T3, right? And we're going to host you on a T3 on a Sun Ultra Spark 10 times 2 and, all of these things. And that was the only distinguishing factor in the hosting.
45 megabits, by the way, at T3 is today. That's special.
Well, back then it was like $40,000 a month. I remember I had to buy it. They were $45,000 a month for a T3 line. And same thing in cars, right? I've got a V8. Well, I got a turbocharged V8 with a super duper. And, I think this is the natural.
What you're describing is a commodity. So, John,
I think AI is a commodity.
Have LLMs become a commodity, John?
It sure has. Yeah. I mean, I'm just going back to just when you consistently make claims, though, it kind of makes the previous news obsolete. So it kind of begs the question. I think, as you said, Mike, maybe they're kind of papering over something or a deficiency in something else they're doing. I don't know. I just am somewhat skeptical of companies that make claims only to say, "Oh, wait, never mind. We're going to make this claim now." I think even going back to the space race and that analogy is back then there were a lot of claims too that kind of were gross exaggerations. So anyway, I'm just coming with a skeptical point of view and wondering
maybe they should said 3 months ago they were going to do this in 3 months, and then that would be more of an achievement. I don't know.
Well, the original point about I think the news cycle is a lot of what's driving this, right? You're capturing a few hours of attention, and you just want to stay on the map, and so you're coming up with ways of it's horse race numbers. Let me talk about this performance or this number.
Exactly.
Some operations of a chip or whatever. And in the end of the day, that's not really meaningful to people, but it gets your name in front of them.
That's exactly. So I was looking at the coverage they got. They got great coverage. Fast Company with The Verge, Reuters. We did something.
That's what it's about.
It's just like they can't buy that amount of publicity. It was totally filtered through them.
And they got 20 minutes on the gag.
Hey, and Robert's going to go to the moon, not because it's easy, but because it's hard.
Oh, God. Nice JFK. Nice JFK, Alan.
A little JFK, exactly. Anyway, let's take a break. We've given Anthropic more than their 15 minutes that they would do. We're going to come back. Mitchell's just back from Berlin, as we mentioned. SUSE has done wow. They're sprawling. Well, I'm going to leave it to Mitchell to tell us what SUSE is doing. We'll be back in a minute.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
All right, folks, we're back. And as promised, we're talking about SUSE, which has kind of been wandering the proverbial IT desert for a long time now. They got bought by Novell. Novell handed them off to Attachmate. Attachmate handed them off to Micro Focus. Then they got sold to a bunch of VCs. And now they're coming full round. And in all of that, they seem to somehow or other remain relevant. So, Mitch, you were in Berlin hanging out with these guys. What's your take?
It was real interesting, the juxtaposition of 2023 versus 2024. 2023, Dirk Peter van Leeuwen was brand new. He literally was there for a few weeks, and he's up there as the CEO of SUSE, talking about not really knowing yet exactly what he's going to do. I'm sure he had some plans, but he wasn't talking about it publicly. In 1 year, let me just talk about SUSE in general. In 1 year, the vibe and the message and how folks are executing has really changed drastically. Frankly, I think private equity firms will do that to you. One, new leadership and changing leadership will also do that to you. Last year was a lot of kind of this silo product, this silo product, this silo product. Not saying they're really truly silos, but they're just kind of going through, here's what the individual cards in the deck are. This year, they were playing a game with the cards, meaning there was all kind of interconnected. And I'll talk about that in terms of what the releases are. But there's a new energy there. I think a lot of it was around the StateStack announcement and the AI announcements. But to be honest with you, I don't think those things would have been as relevant without SUSE changing or evolving to a more cohesive, execution-focused organization. So let me talk about some of the announcements. I'm not going to go through all of them because every product kind of had their point release. They did extend set the on Service Pack 16, I think it was, for SUSE Enterprise Linux to 2037. So they clearly set a time horizon. They're all about the production environment of Linux. That's their strength. We're trustworthy. We're reliable. We'll go take the hits and keep on hitting, keep on going. And also there was an announcement about SUSE Liberty, which is back to the Red Hat Linux Enterprise that they forked, and this is their support for it for CentOS 7, which is end of life, I think, in a month or two. But when you step back, the kind of big announcements, and there were others, the big announcements were about the AI platform. I call it a platform. They didn't call that. They call it SUSE AI, not surprisingly. But Pilar Santamaria is the person that came over from Google. She was running cloud for EMEA. And what they put together is not another LLM, not another chatbot for AI. What they put together is, here's how the entire platform of SUSE technology, from SUSE Enterprise Linux and the pieces of that, and the SUSE Manager for managing all those things, Rancher, etc. Here's how we have configured this kind of in a subset way to run production-ready, run AI applications, Gen AI specifically. So if you're looking for a path to production from beyond what I said before about the science experiment, the pilot, to the early app, to how do I really run this? That's what they're trying to present their customers, which I think is really smart. It's infrastructure operations for AI. That was a big announcement. Of course, the big kind of surprise for everybody, of course, was the acquisition of StackState. We know Andreas Prinz from companies ago, as well as StackState. That deal was just signed the day before the conference opened. And actually, the dating started back in KubeCon in Paris when we were all there doing other things. Mm-hmm. And StackState's going to become Rancher observability. It's not going to stay a different product or a different brand.
Yeah, no, it's going to fold into Rancher.
So they already were a partner working with them. So I have some thoughts about that, but we'll get to that in a moment. Go ahead, Alan.
So, Mitchell, first of all, I got to tell you, you did a great, you were there. I mean, just following along on your LinkedIn post, it was a great job of the coverage. So thanks very much. I felt like I was almost there. When I look, first of all, is it SUSE or SUSE? I always pronounce it as SUSE.
They say SUSE over there.
SUSE.
Most of what I heard was
Mike has that Bronx accent. He says SUSE.
He puts an R at the end of everything, as from the Bronx.
But that being said, here's what I say. First of all, major kudos to the SUSE team, because they've expanded beyond Linux, right? We used to just think of SUSE, the chameleon, and SUSE Linux. Within Linux, they've done a great job, because I think Red Hat fumbled with CentOS and that. And I think SUSE did a great job of recovering that fumble, and they're going to try to run that into the end zone and spike it. But beyond the Linux, this started with Rancher a few years ago. They've made a big push to become a huge cloud native player. And I think that's what StateStack is all about, this move to AI, obviously. They are, I think, more than any of the other, Linux distros out there, and we try to cover them all. They've done a good job of going beyond Linux. And, they're a cloud native player for sure. And this kind of doubles down on that. But at the same time, Red Hat is still probably their biggest competitor within the Linux world. And they, as I said, they recovered that fumble, it seems. I give them a ton of credit for really, as you said, wandering the desert for 40 years to, reaching the Holy Land here.
Also give them credit for staying on the open source bandwagon.
Yeah.
They reinforced that with StateStack. It will be open sourced. They haven't announced when, but they will make an announcement about that. And right up front, it'll be open source. We believe that the whole thing was choice. So the thing was about open source. I think that's a big part of their message too, is, let Red Hat be Red Hat. We're going to be open source.
Mitchell, did you get a sense that this is kind of devolving into, they are open source in Europe and Red Hat is open source in North America? Are we starting to see some geography centered?
No, I think the open source community is pissed at Red Hat because Red Hat, like Hashi, moving away from classic open source, and SUSE is a champion of them. Mitch, if you feel differently, go ahead.
No, I agree with that. And I think acquiring a US-based StateStack helps with kind of expanding the geography. They're clearly, very well established in Europe, and they're in the US too, but not like Red Hat. Their base is SAP applications running on SUSE, of course, which runs everywhere in the world. But I think it is a play to expand geography and build a community beyond just strength in Europe and hit the shores of the U.S. much harder.
Hey, Mitchell, I was going to ask you about that. I was wondering, since this company is not as well known or relatively obscure in the U.S. compared to Red Hat, do you think this has any appreciable impact on them trying to gain some sort of market share or brand name recognition based on what they've done in the U.S.?
Absolutely. I think StateStack will help them be better known. I mean, not that they are. They're sort of known in the operations infrastructure part of IT, right? They're not the Red Hat brand in terms of rolling off everybody's tongue as much. But if you've been around, you know about SUSE, and it's because it started in 92 or 93, something like that. But I think they are. When you looked at the people attending the conference, of course, it was very well attended from from folks in the European Union, but also there were a lot of Americans there. There were a lot of people on the planes. Right, I sat next to three people, including Keith Basil, who's the GM for the Edge business unit. He's literally sitting across the aisle from me. There were a lot of people traveling from the U.S. to go to this conference, and they're moving the next conference. I think it's in November, if I remember right. No, it's in April of 2025 in Orlando.
Wow. So, Mitchell, I'm going to disagree on the StateStack piece. First of all, StateStack's hardly a household word in the U.S., Mexico, or anywhere else in the world. Their CEO and their development team were all based in Amsterdam and in Europe. Yeah, they had some marketing folks that we know based here in the U.S., but they weren't. The StateStack acquisition isn't going to give them a ton of U.S. exposure. I think, quite frankly, Red Hat fumbled, right? This CentOS and Red Hat Enterprise Linux thing and changing of some of the licenses has given SUSE and maybe Canonical and some of the other open source players an opening, a seam that they're going to try to exploit. And I think SUSE's messaging is dead on it. Mitchell, they gave it to you and you repeated it. I'm trying to remember exactly what you said. But when you said something about, they're the true champions of open source and Red Hat can do what they want or whatever.
Yeah, let Red Hat be Red Hat.
Let Red Hat be Red Hat. And the message there is Red Hat's not really through open source.
Well, here's what I meant about, I know StateStack is definitely, based in Europe. What I meant by that is it changes the conversation, right? We're not just talking about Rancher and SUSE, because there's a lot of other piece parts to SUSE, products, if you will, but we don't talk about those things as much. Now we're going to talk about observability, which is a big topic on our agenda, right? Whether you're talking about Splunk or Sumo or anybody else. And I think it elevates StateStack. The fact that they're going to not call it StateStack, they've got to elevate that brand now in Rancher observability. But they got a whole new story to tell. They have a whole new visibility to show what's happening across the infrastructure, the application, Kubernetes, all that stuff that they just struggled to do with Rancher alone.
Tracy, are these guys on your radar screen? Because sometimes I talk to people and they go, "Oh yeah, I remember them. They're still around."
You mean StateStack?
Well,
StateStack. Yeah, but let me talk about StateStack first, because I did run into them and I looked at their product and I was pretty excited about it. It provides information and does aggregation of some of the data that we've always talked about. So it's a really good alternative. Since it will become open source, it's a really great open source observability tool. Not that OpenTelemetry is bad or any of the other ones are bad, but I think it's going to push that market in a really positive way.
They also emphasize eBPF as well as OpenTelemetry as their main data input format.
Yeah. But, I haven't even thought about SUSE in so long. I think this conversation kind of reminded me they were out there. And I knew they were big in Europe, but I've been so involved in the Linux Foundation and working with the folks at Red Hat, I haven't even thought of them. So as Mitch has pointed out, this particular kind of launch and kind of, rebranding or pivoting and having this discussion, I think it's going to be very exciting for the open source community in this particular space. Because sometimes I don't feel like we have a lot of options, to be honest. And bringing SUSE back into the picture, I think, is a really good move for the open source community in general, and the enterprise Linux community, because we need options. We really do.
Absolutely. Hey guys, we're about out of time. Look, good for SUSE, and they seem to be on the right path, and to applaud them. And Mitchell, great job covering that over at in Berlin. I think that's going to wrap our Monday here.
Can I put in one plug for Techstrong TV? On Tuesday, my exclusive interview with Chris Betts, the CISO at AWS, will be airing as part of CISO Talk. So be sure to check out that. I was very impressed with his keynote during AWS Reinforce. So it's a good recap in some ways of what he talked about. So definitely check that out on Techstrong TV.
Coming tomorrow. Speaking of Techstrong TV, of course, we have a full Techstrong TV schedule following Techstrong Gang here, as we always do. We're going to be we have been adding some new features to the gang, too. We have kind of a weekly session from our friend Bob Russelman, Roll Bob, too.
A couple more coming behind.
We have a couple more. And then we also have Ira Winkler, security personality extraordinaire, who's going to be doing his own little episode as part of the gang here called Bite Me. And if you know Ira, you can imagine.
And then John's going to do a little report from the Valley.
Yes, John's going to be doing a Valley. We're going to 5 days a week. We've got a lot of great new content coming your way. Stay tuned for it on Techstrong TV and the Techstrong Gang. But for now, John, Tracy, Mitchell, Mike, thanks very much. This is Alan Schimmel for Techstrong, and you just watched the Techstrong Gang.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.